The new GOG store boss has commented on the major differences in values between GOG and Steam, which has people talking a lot about the pros and cons of curation. He makes note of Steam's greatest strength, which is their ease of use for developers and customers. However, he also implies that GOG's strength is their strong curation and lack of bloat, criticizing Steam that 95% of the games released on the platform are just not high quality. So is he onto something? Are we really starting to complain that there's just too many games now? Is top-down curation the actual solution to discovery? Well, let's look at the claim of too many games, then we can look into the pros and cons of different curation strategies. Every year on Steam, more games are released than the year before. That's just undeniable. 10 years ago, we're looking at under 5,000 new games in a year. In 2025, Steam is quadrupling that number to 20,000. There are very awesome tools like SteamDB that show when Steam increased that ease of use GOG are talking about. In 2012, when they introduced the green light voting system, and in 2017 when they introduced Steam Direct, where nearly all friction was removed to release a game, besides the $100 fee. Both these events caused a massive surge in the number of games released on Steam, and if you take the GOG line of thinking, the consequence was clutter. So we can agree with GOG that there are a lot more games than ever before to sift through in order to, find the right game. But more games to play isn't bad, right? Giving us options leaves the agency with us, the people spending the money. Well, the argument might be that in reality, you don't actually see or play these games, or if you do see them, you skip right over them. At least half the games released in 2025 sold about 100 copies or less. Most games on the platform aren't being played, leading some to believe that the excess games are just unnecessary bloat. So is this a failure of discovery or a failure of quality? Well, a little bit of both. Steam Direct made it easier to release your game, so more hobbyists and beginner developers released their games. You could argue this means the store was flooded with slop and shovelware. However, I would argue that Steam created an open ecosystem where junior developers can try and fail, and as a result, over time you create more quality developers and more quality games. More often than not, a developer needs to make slop before they're qualified to make their magnum opus. Steam has made the first step to being a good developer more achievable. This means more people who would be good developers pursue it. It also means you could be rewarded all the same for your first game, assuming people want to buy it. If you scroll through new releases on Steam, you can get the idea that not all these games are released with commercial viability in mind. Many of them are people's first game or a hobby project. This does indicate a reduction in quality on the store, but also indicates more and more developers are making games that could potentially be the next hit. The proportion of good games might fall, but the real number of good games will definitely rise. Whether you think that influx of great indie games and developers is worth the lower quality releases that also come with it is the key to your perspective on curation. So what would more curation offer? The GOG approach to curation is to make sure a game proves itself in some way before listing it. The result is definitely a higher average quality of game on the platform, where you can be confident all the games play as expected. You have a much lower chance of, downloading a game and finding a bunch of AI slop and broken menus. But you're not going to find that breakout indie game that some influencer discovered last week on Steam. It's no surprise that GOG's catalog trends towards older games as a result. This is most people's use case for the platform. The other would be DRM-free preservation of classic games. If you find yourself constantly disappointed with most games you look at to the point it discourages you from looking at all, aggressive curation is probably better for you. Not everyone wants to LARP as a game reviewer just to relax with an interesting game for the evening. One of the fundamental problems of GOG's criticism is that a game needs to prove itself before being added to their store. I would ask what this process looks like in a world where developers can't prove themselves on Steam because they've adopted GOG's same aggressive curation strategy. Itch, I guess? What if they follow GOG's principles too? You would be kneecapping one of the best pipelines for a new dev to become a great dev. Heavy curation is just friction from some behind-the-scenes group deciding if a developer is good enough to make a game for me. I think I'm capable of judging that myself. By the numbers, the vast majority of indie games just do suck. But I believe wholeheartedly that the best games in the past 20 years have come from smaller independent developers, and I really don't like any philosophy where those developers might be unfairly judged by a curator, instead of the only metric that truly matters. Are there people who want to play the game? Heavy curation would remove the democratic elements of the Steam platform, literally the platform's greatest strength. It erodes the feeling that the gamers decide what is good and popular through their actual playtime and purchases. I don't want Steam to feel more like a console store. I don't know if you do. It may sound like I'm a bit of a GOG hater because I disagree with some of these statements, but really I'm not. I think GOG and Steam serve distinct parts of the PC gamer market with mutual benefit to each other. It admittedly annoys me that GOG seemed to imply some failure on Steam's part, when I believe the GOG platform would suffer without the proving grounds of Steam, and both developers and customers would suffer if the democratic curation processes of Steam were replaced with curation from the top. But I really think GOG are making bold statements to juxtapose themselves against Steam, to highlight their own unique selling points in typical PR form. But I did feel their statements were made with a somewhat naive perspective worth my commenting on.